Hello, Rachel.
Hey, Brittany.
So today, the last episode we talked about how to land your first job. And I think that really segues or leads into today's episode really well. Because today I want to talk about, or the question I'm asking to our listeners is, what do you want to be when you grow up? How do you know what you want to be when you grow up? And I think this is really fun. I think from the time we're little, we have like something. I really wanted to be a bus driver when I was 3 because I was like, I want to drive. What career will let me drive? And I was like, well, obviously a bus driver. Now that didn't last forever. From the time I was 5 to even now, sometimes I'd always wanted to be an actress or a performer in some way, which I do get to do from time to time. You know, I am a singer. I do comedy sometimes. So some of those things stick with me. Now, those things are not lucrative. They don't provide always a good living. But that actually brings me to...
Not as lucrative as you might think.
As you might think. And so I have... I hate to call it a real job because I'm not saying acting isn't a real job. But I think this is actually an interesting topic because different careers do pay different things. And I think that there is something really important to address. And that is, you know, I know for my parents and grandparents, it wasn't about doing what you love. That was not really a priority. You did what you did to put food on the table. And if that meant you were miserable at work, you powered through because that's what people did. And it's admirable in its own way, because I do think that is so important to put food on the table. We all need food on the table. But I think quality of life wasn't as good. And I think that there is so much opportunity now with social media. And as much as I kind of snicker at influencers, I hate that word, on social media, I have to give them credit for finding a way to do what they love and get paid for it. And so maybe some of my snickering is actually a little bit of envy, which isn't good. So how do you want to be, or how do you know what you want to be when you grow up? And I think a lot of that is trying different things. And one of the negatives to college, which, you know, we talk about a lot, Connor has a great book, Skip College, which I wrote a chapter for. So check that out. Even if you're, you know, a kid, I think they're maybe a little older, the lessons will be really good for you. Parents highly suggest it. But college kind of locks you into one thing, and it locks you into one thing before you've even stepped into the real world. And then you have 4 years, maybe more, if you got a master's degree of something you absolutely hate. And if you took out student loans, now you're stuck paying those. And even if you didn't, college is very expensive. So that is kind of a danger of college, especially if you are somebody maybe who majored in something like women's studies or something that doesn't really have a lot of job opportunities. And I remember when I was applying to colleges, you know, they were saying like, pick something that has the opportunity for you to make a fair amount of money to live. I chose history and political science. History probably wouldn't have been that lucrative. Political science has helped me. Again, I did not finish because for me, I had made the connections. I networked. I did what I needed to do to get really good jobs. And so I didn't finish because to me, the cost benefit wasn't in the favor of finishing school. But one thing I really love is there's a lot of innovative schools right now. And this was starting up years ago, but I think since the pandemic, it's exploded. There's a great school. I think it's called like the 2-hour learning method is what the school is based on. I can't remember the actual school, but I just happened to stumble upon this on Instagram, and it was really cool because the kids are there for a full school day, but the first 2-hour block is their learning block. And that's when they do all their, you know, reading, writing, and arithmetic, as they used to call it. And they do it all through AI catered programs that are specific to each kid. 2 hours and they get all their work done. Some of them are like passing like several grade levels in a few months. But the rest of the day is based on entrepreneurial pursuits and things like that, and working with not teachers, but guides who kind of help them. I think that's really cool. There's another school called Acton Academy that I'm just obsessed with. They've been around for a while. And this is my favorite. So my favorite part of this school is they encourage apprenticeships at a very young age. Now, an apprenticeship is where you work under somebody who's skilled or somebody who's already established in the field, and you get to kind of shadow them, as they say, walk around, see what they do. But this is really good because you get an experience in that field, and maybe you find out you love it, and maybe you find out like, this isn't for me. And I heard a story, this was over a decade ago, about a young girl at Acton Academy who wanted to be in fashion. And she was 10, and she was able to get this apprenticeship with a fashion company. And she went and she learned that she didn't want to be in fashion. And that to me is 10? So, at 10, it wasn't for her. And maybe she'll change her mind, but she got some experience in that world and was able to say no. The problem with college is you get stuck in this career and you might be miserable, and nobody likes every day of work. I love my job. Every day I go to work and I'm just filled with so much passion. That doesn't mean there aren't days where I'm like, ugh, again, you know? And so I think everyone's going to have those days. And so not everything is going to be sunshine and roses, as they say, but I have something that I'm passionate about. So how to know what you want to be when you grow up. And I think the key to that, because not everybody has the opportunity to go to these new schools where you can do all these apprenticeships, but that doesn't mean you can't do apprenticeships. You can approach things, companies or professions you want to do and ask them. They may not say, yes, but these are still things you can do. I think learning a ton of skills is fantastic. I always talk about my obsession with bread making because it's just something that brings me joy. Baking and bread making bring me joy. Now, that's not my career, but what if I had learned that as a kid and then been like, maybe I'll get a summer job at a bakery, or maybe I'll ask a baker if I can, follow them around for one day and I can see if that's something, because you can, that's a career you could have. And so I think it's important to have something in mind and maybe test that out and see if you like it. And I think having dreams is also very important. I really don't like, I think I've mentioned this in the beginning, that the older generations kind of had this idea of, that's a silly dream, don't go for that, to become an accountant. And there's nothing wrong with that. We all need accountants, or, choose the safe road. And I really admire, I'm a performer after work. And I always admire people who are a little younger than me who have taken a risk and they have made performing their career. And the reason I admire them is because when your life or your livelihood depends on it, you have to hustle a little bit harder. And
it becomes a job.
It becomes a job. And because I have a career that is very, very good and I've worked hard for it, I'm not willing to give up the comfort and security of that to pursue performing full time. And I'm very, I just admire so much the people that do. So, what you want to be when you grow up, I think starts with, what are you passionate about? I know they used to ask us, Rachel, what do you want to be when you grow up? And now I hear some people, and I don't always agree with this, who say, what problem do you want to solve in the world as you grow up? And I think that's important. But, I think of people who want to be professional singers or something. It's what problem do you want to solve? And I don't think that's as clear cut, other than entertaining people, which is essential to the human experience. But, Rachel, what did you want to be when you grew up as a kid?
Oh, this is funny. The first thing I wanted to be when I grew up was a ballerina. And
you do dance, don't you?
I do love to dance, but there's some problems with me being a ballerina, and that is, to be a really successful professional ballerina, you need to be tall and willowy. Mm-hmm. That's kind of, it's kind of a non-starter.
Yeah.
And I am not tall and willowy by any means. As much as
you and I are little.
I'm short, and I'm a little thicker in the build. I wouldn't say I'm fat, but I'm just not tall and thin. Mm-hmm.
You don't have the ballerina. Yeah.
I don't have the build for it,
Well, it would just be if you wanted to be a runway model, you have to be tall for that. So it's just,
and that's something that I can't change. And also in my childhood, in my child rearing, I was not really in a place to train for that a lot.
It's expensive
too. I went to a really good ballet school in Haiti, actually, taught by this awesome French lady who taught in French and would beat us with a stick if our legs weren't straight, So I did get a chance, and I was good at it. I was good at it, but it's become a hobby. I'm glad that I trained as much as I did, which was only really like a couple of years. And it's enriched my life, and I know about it. And when I watch ballet, I can appreciate it more because I know that's hard. But that's not what I grew up to be. And I discovered in 7th grade when I was homeschooled that what I really love is writing. And
same.
I didn't know I didn't know how I was going to make a living writing novels or something. Like I didn't think like that was a good career really. But what I have learned through my life is you don't have to be a novel writer to make a living as a writer. That's a really good skill, as you know, that
we're both writers.
You can, you can employ in different ways, like marketing, like writing articles, blog posts. You know, there's all kinds of communication that needs to happen in the world. And there's all kinds of ways to employ good writing skills. So I had this fantasy of wanting to be a writer, but I never thought it would come true. And here I am living the dream.
That's exactly how I feel. And it's sometimes I have to pinch myself. I'm like, do I get paid to do what I love? And then other days I'm like, it's hard to remember that I love it because it becomes a job. You have to keep falling in love with it. But you bring up a really good point about hobbies. I know we're running out of time, but I want to mention this real fast. You know, I have been a singer since a very young age, and I'm a good singer, but I'm not the best singer. And so that's become a hobby that brings me joy that I do in my spare time. And during the pandemic, I taught myself how to play the piano using YouTube and all sorts of online resources. And so that's something that brings me joy that after I come home from work, I can do and kind of relax. And so you can love something. You can love many things. I'm what I call a serial hobbyist. There's always something new I pick up. And that doesn't have to become my career. But just like Rachel said, the fact that I learned how to make writing a lucrative career, sometimes I still have to be like, oh my goodness, how did I do this? And I think my dad is, I know my dad is in awe of that because my dad is a fantastic writer. That's, where I developed my love of writing. And he was from the generation where you do what you do to put food on your table. And thank goodness for that. I'm where I am today. But I do love seeing his pride in me that I was able to do what he loves, but I was able to make it my career. And so that's kind of a touching thing. So how to figure out what you want to be when you grow up, try a lot of things because you're young. You know, Connor always talks about how entrepreneurship as a kid is like, that's the time to try it because you don't have all the risks of trying to provide for your family. You can fail and you will fail as you're trying new things and learning what you want to do and what you don't want to do. Yeah. And that's okay. And don't wait till you're an adult. You know, find out what you want to do. Watch documentaries if you're not able to do an apprenticeship. But and I don't want to say the silly like follow your dream, but also do that. If you think you can become a famous musician, you don't have to be a rock star. You can find ways to maybe compose music for things. We'll have Elijah who does the illustrations for the Tuttle Twins on here at some point. He is a fantastic illustrator. And look, he found a way to turn that into a career, which I think is so cool. So I think this is a really important topic, not just because I picked it, but because I do think it's an important topic. But we will leave it there. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast. And until next time, we'll talk to you later.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.